So we have some breaking news that Doug Ford's Ontario PC government is cancelling the Hamilton LRT, the light rail transit. And the reason they're doing it, ostensibly, is because the cost is greater than what was estimated by the previous Liberal government. But I'm here to tell you that that is almost certainly a lie at this stage. Right now, the original costs were slated in around the $1 billion range, and some of the contracts given out by the province still have the deal under $2 billion. But the current Ontario PC government, the minister responsible being Caroline Mulroney, are suggesting that the cost is as much as 5 times more than what the Liberals suggested, which is the rationale they're using to cancel the deal. But the thing is that when you actually try to find the rationale for the $5 billion figure, it seems to point, if anything, to a 30-year estimate of costs. Because of course, when you build any sort of infrastructure, there's the original construction cost along with the cost of upkeep. And the original budget was clearly set for the actual construction of the infrastructure, and everyone knew that. And in the recent election, Doug Ford and his PCs promised to honor that infrastructure deal, which was vital for Hamilton, and they lied. They broke that promise, and they didn't break it because of costs, because at the end of the day, the costs are generally in line with what was estimated, and long-term costs, as important as they are, with this seem rather reasonable to me. A 30-year window is a long time, and so you can expect a lot of cost, but the value to this light rail transit is essential, and it's essential for a couple reasons. One is that increasingly, it's not just Toronto that needs transit that goes beyond buses. Recently, Ottawa has had increased transit infrastructure, but Hamilton is a very, very rapidly growing city, growing because of its own industry and its own economy, but also because it's increasingly a place where a lot of Torontonians, not being able to find housing, have been moving, and many people are commuting between Toronto and Hamilton. And so there's a need for mass public transit that goes beyond simple busing and goes beyond the existing GO lines, which is one of the reasons LRT is needed. But more than that, it's essential to help address the needs of a climate shift. At the end of the day, we need to reduce our reliance on the car, on the individual person driving to and from work on the roads, and increase the usage of mass transit, which is better for the environment. That's what we need to do. And cities like Hamilton and many other cities in this province, like Kingston, Ontario, where I live, for instance, have declared climate emergencies. And in so doing, they've recognized and they've appealed to their citizens, but also to other levels of government, that we need to find ways to address the climate emergency before doing so becomes impossible or extremely prohibitively expensive. And one of the ways you can do that is through investing in green mass transit. The LRT was one of those investments. So why would Doug Ford cancel it? As we've seen, Doug Ford really doesn't care about the budget. All estimates before he got elected showed that while Andrea Horwath and the Ontario NDP would have the best approach to deficits, Doug Ford and his government would have the worst. Because while they were making cuts, they were also reducing taxes on a lot of wealthy people and businesses and what have you, and that lowers public revenue. And at the end of the day, this government actually spends more than the previous one, delivering Ontarians less in the process. So it's not about budgets. Not only are they lying about this specific project, this government has shown that when they want to spend money, be it on their pet projects or be it on tax cuts, they will spend the money. It's about an attack on a city that voted NDP. That's the main reason. Hamilton, Ontario, in the provincial election was swept by the NDP. It was a bastion of progressive voters rejecting Doug Ford's agenda, and this is an act of vengeance against the people of Hamilton, against the Hamilton City Council, against the Hamilton MPPs. It's also about an attack on the green agenda. Doug Ford doesn't like the green agenda. Doug Ford doesn't like policies and movements to address climate change. He is not just neutral on the idea. He's not just, concerned that these programs have costs. Doug Ford actively opposes efforts to improve environmental standards in this province. Sometimes, even though there's no real benefit to anyone, he does it out of spite. He cancels green energy contracts even though it will not actually save the taxpayer any money. Whether you agreed with those contracts in the first place, at this stage, there's no benefit in canceling them, and yet Doug Ford in some cases has done that. And here, there's no real benefit. There's no real gain. What this is a cynical attack on NDP voters and on anything that can be seen as part of the green agenda. It goes into what Doug Ford's brother, the late Rob Ford, would term, the war on the car. And Doug Ford and Rob Ford represent a certain style of politics that is in part rooted in this fear of the war on the car. And the LRT can be classified as part of that war. So for Ford, it's not simply about budgets. It's not simply about fiscal prudence. It's not really about that at all. It's about preserving the car culture, that sort of culture that whatever its effects on the environment, on city infrastructure, on the ability for people to get where they damn well need to go, anything that attacks that, Doug Ford, Rob Ford, that general political vein will fight it. So at the end of the day, folks, look past the claims of Doug Ford and Caroline Mulroney. This isn't about budgets. This isn't about cost overruns. This isn't about trying to save the taxpayer money. This is an attack on green politics. This is an attack on a city that dared to vote NDP. And this is an attack on anything that can be seen even remotely as part of the anti-car war. Don't forget it.